Deputy Adams, thank you. Deputy Adams, please. Deputy Adams, thank you. Deputy Adams, thank you.
The Taoiseach, in February this year you gave a heartfelt apology on behalf of the state to the survivors of the Magdalene laundries for the hurt that was done to them. And you quite rightly told the women that they were blameless, and I have no doubt that you were moved by their life stories when you met with them. And for the women, that apology for the time that they were incarcerated in a brutal regime overseen by the state, for the women that apology was a turning point. But so too was the government's announcement of a redress scheme. Now, your decision to make this redress scheme an ex gratia scheme, and indeed to ask the women to agree to make no further claim against the state if they access the scheme, I thought at the time was in marked contrast to the generous tone of your apology. And it's this issue of liability that's clearly motivating the religious order's refusal to make a contribution, a financial contribution to the redress scheme. It's also my view that this issue of liability is what underpins the government's own redress scheme and, for example, your refusal to deal with the Bethany home. And, Taoiseach, and I say this respectfully, the government's record of failure to tackle the elites and to pursue institutions for wrongdoing is shocking, and it's not good enough. The elites, whether they're in financial institutions or religious institutions, need to be made accountable to the will of the people. It's no accident that the women and girls were mostly poor. That's the reality, most of them. And then as now, it's one law for the poor and one law for the rich. And that's the harsh reality of it all. So I don't think it's good enough for the government to be disappointed.
Thank you.
And to hope that these institutions do the right thing. I would like you to tell us, Taoiseach, what this government intends to do to ensure that the religious orders whose institutions benefited from the enslavement of girls and women in their commercial enterprises, what does the government intend to do to make sure that they pay their fair share into the Magdalene Redress Scheme?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
I think I should say first here, Deputy Adams, this has always been a sensitive matter. And for over 60 years, nothing was done about this. Nothing. Government after government, my own party included, involved in some of those, did nothing about this.
We have.
Now, we've done something about it. And the first thing that those women wanted when I met them was a sense of righteousness, that the state would apologise for what happened. That's the first thing. That's what they wanted. Secondly, they wanted to put in place, because of their circumstances and their age and whatever else, a system that was non-litigious, that was non-adversarial, that would be quick, would be efficient, that would deliver a conclusion and a solution for these women. And in order to arrive at that, the McAleese report was important, the Justice Quirk report was important, and the solution is there. We can't do the scheme without the help of the religious orders here, because they have all the records about who worked and who attended and who lived in the laundries. But this scheme, Deputy Adams, was not contingent upon a 50-50 principle or upon a forced contribution from the religious orders. The government set out to do something about this where nothing had been done for over 60 years. Now, I would like to think that the religious orders would make a contribution here. I can't force them to, because the scheme wasn't designed on that basis. These people do not have time on their side. In respect of the redress scheme, there are 18 religious orders involved here. There's been a 1.5 billion payout. The Minister for Education is involved in discussions with all of those religious orders on the basis of a scheme that was drafted on the principle of a 50-50 contribution. And he will bring his memo to government probably next week or the week after in regard to that. for the Magdalene laundries, and it was told to me face to face that time is not on their side. They didn't want tribunals. They didn't want millionaire lawyers emerging from this. They didn't want a long-term set of discussions here. They wanted speedy, non-litigious, effective response, and they wanted an apology from the state. That's all in place. I would say to the religious orders, we can't complete this without their cooperation in terms of the records and all of that, and I would ask them to reflect on the question of a monetary contribution here. I can't force them to do that. I can't take away the charitable status like some have been talking for. This is an issue that they know about themselves, and that's the position.
Thank you. Deputy Adams.
Very much welcomed your apology, and I acknowledge entirely that this came after decades of other governments doing nothing. So that's not an issue of contention between us. What this is about is accountability. And I also met the women. The day of your apology, one of them sang to us, sang the fields of Athenry, round here in the room, such spirit and tenacity and good humour and fun despite what they had gone through. So what do they want? They wanted an apology, but they want accountability, and they want compensation. And it is not good enough, because the suggestion in what you're saying is we need the cooperation of the orders. I mean, the suggestion is almost that that's a quid pro quo. The fact is the government isn't powerless in this situation. I'm not advocating any particular. I listened to the Minister of Justice rejecting different suggestions that have been made. I'm simply looking, if we want to restore faith in society, faith in politics, faith in the imperative of politics, that we need to make these institutions, whatever their background, make these institutions accountable. So I think it would be helpful, Taoiseach, if, and I do think this issue of liability is at the core of all of this. I mean, let's not dismiss that as a very, very important consideration. But I do think that you should publish the letters from the religious orders that the government have received. And I would ask you to make personal contact with them and to demand that they fulfil their duty to these survivors, to the small number of survivors who, as you yourself have said, are quite elderly and some of them are quite infirm. But publishing the letters, being transparent, getting all of this out would be a very useful first step.
Taoiseach?
No. See, I have no intention of going down a legal route of confrontation with the religious orders on this. It is the women involved here who have accepted the outcome of the Quirk recommendations.
Sure, yes, please.
These are the results of a process which was put in place at the request of the women, of the Magdalene women, that this matter would be dealt with speedily, effectively, compensation would be paid, that it would be, as I said, non-adversarial, non-litigious, non-legal routes over years. In order to define the work records and the attendance records of those who lived and worked in the Magdalene laundries, they need the cooperation of the religious orders, and they've given that. And the government have made its decision in respect of the extent of the compensation, depending on the numbers that are involved here. We would expect that following the recommendations of Justice Quirk, that the religious orders should consider making a monetary contribution towards this amount. Now, I'm not going down the route of legal action in a confrontational manner with the religious orders about this. They know the accountability involved here is coming from the hearts of those women who demanded that the state would do something, and we've set out a process by which that is being dealt with, and that has been put in place, and the government have decided on the range of compensation amounts that are there on the recommendations of Judge Quirk.
Thank you.
The religious orders involved here know all about this, Deputy Adams, and they can make a decision now on reflection to make a monetary contribution towards this a compensation amount if they so wish. But don't expect me to have the state go down a route where you would spend more than any compensation amount that they would make on a legal route that would not see the compensation paid to the women that we want to see.
Thank you.
Simple, effective, direct. And if Deputy MacDonald has something better to say to me, then I'm prepared to listen to it. But Deputy MacDonald and her party have a lot to answer for in terms of accountability in this country. As you
Deputy Halligan, thank you.